and welcome to the Bedroom Studios podcast, the podcast where we talk about what goes on behind the scenes in a musician's world and bridge the industry gap by bringing their stories, expertise, and advice to early career artists. Subscribe to join us for a fun chat about life as a creative person, tips and tricks for pursuing an artistic career, navigating the industry, and more. I am your host, Emma, and today I will be interviewing Stef Haynes. And Stef Haynes is a musician and producer living in Toronto, specializing in woodwinds and electronic wind instruments. Stef is a frequent collaborator with artists of many different genres and musical backgrounds. So, hello.
Hello.
And welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how are you? How's everything going?
I'm good. I'm a little out of breath because I biked here at top speed, and there's a lot of construction on the way, which is not uncommon, but I'm still catching my breath.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just jump right into it. I want to start with just having you sort of share a bit about your journey to pursuing music and like when you first started becoming interested in music and how that sort of led to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So I guess if we want to go way back, my parents, they put me in music classes when I was like 4, and those classes were called Kodai, and that's like you're probably familiar as someone who knows about music education and stuff. But for those of you listening who maybe don't, it's a music education program for like younger kids that encourages like play and I don't know, anything you want to add to that as an expert?
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself an expert in it. It's really based on solfege, right? Mm-hmm. Solfege, singing.
I remember doing a lot of drawing and placing notes on felt stabs, and that was fun. And when I got to be too old for that, I did violin lessons for a couple of years, but I didn't really click with the instrument. That could have been because I was 8 years old, and it's hard to do things well when you're 8. But eventually, I stopped doing violin lessons, and I started doing saxophone lessons. And what brought me to that was my brother, who is a pianist, he had like a really big interest in jazz, and continues to. And he introduced me to Dave Brubeck Quartet and Paul Desmond, and I heard Take 5, and I was like, wow, that saxophone sounds amazing. So when I was like 11 or 12, I think I started taking saxophone lessons. And between listening to the jazz that my brother introduced me to, and listening to like jam bands and rock and roll stuff that my cousins introduced me to, and hearing the saxophone in those contexts, I was like, yeah, saxophone, it's where it's at. It's what I want to do. I want to play in bands. I want to, make music. So after playing saxophone for a couple of years, my mom's friend's son, who, fun fact, used to be my babysitter, invited me to sit in with this band, which was called Infunkstigation, which later changed its name to Freak Motif, and I've been
I love both of those.
Yeah, and I've been making music with them, since I was 14, and we've got a couple of EPs and a couple of albums out, and we've performed all over Canada, and that's been a good time. Hasn't been super active lately because the band members keep having children, so that gets in the way. But in my early teens, that was my first introduction to not only performing live but making music in a recording studio and putting albums out, and that just was a lot of fun, and it reinforced my conviction that music is what I want to do. So fast forward a couple of years, I get my jazz performance degree at Humber College, and then I just graduated from U of T in music technology and digital media, actually. So
Yay, congrats.
That's kind of where I'm at right now in my education, and along the way I've played in a lot of bands and made a lot of music with a lot of people, and it's been a great time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So do you find that being in the band with your mom's friend's son, which I guess is your friend now?
Yeah, he definitely is. Shout outs.
Do you find that that was where you started getting into production, or was it more like when you were studying in Humber? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I wish that's when I started getting into production, but that actually happened way later. That actually didn't really happen for me until COVID pandemic times, and I was like, well, I'm not really spending much time performing live right now, so that's when I really started checking out music production and getting into Ableton and making beats and other stuff like that. But I remember when I was getting really into that, thinking, wow, if only I had this when I was in high school, it would just be like, it's the perfect vehicle for self-expression for me. And I remember back in the early days of like trying to create music using software, using stuff like Sibelius, and that's like not the best sounding program, and I find that it really limits it's for making sheet music, it's not for like expressing musical subtlety or anything like that.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do with it in terms of how it sounds in a recording.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, but multi-track recording yourself, like even if it's just super rough, it's a much more musical way to experiment with music and try out ideas and stuff. So yeah, wish I had gotten there sooner, but it did actually take me a long time.
Yeah, I the exact same thing happened with me, where it's like once the pandemic happened, it's like, oh, I have time to explore this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know a lot of people have the same story. It's not uncommon at all.
Yeah, that's actually really surprising, though, because just like listening to your stuff and what you've been able to do, I just assume that you've been doing it for years and years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I've had good teachers. I mean, there's a huge difference in the music that I'm putting together now after studying music technology at U of T for 2 years and the music that I've put out before. But I've certainly worked hard at it, so I'll give myself a bit of credit there.
And I guess that something I wanted to talk about as well was EWIs. Because I don't know, I feel like people know you as kind of like an expert in that. So can you explain what an EWI is?
Yeah, I could talk about that all day. So an EWI is a acronym, or I guess it's an acronym for electronic wind instrument. And the EWI as a brand name is actually owned by Akai. So when people say EWI, they're usually referring to that specific instrument that's made by Akai, but there's actually quite a few different, I like to call them digital wind instruments to sort of differentiate there. There's actually, quite a few out on the market these days. And it's actually like a quickly growing niche, and more people are becoming interested in it, even though they've been around since like the 70s or the 60s even. I think the first patent goes back to the 40s, but the first performances on it were probably in the 60s on an instrument called the Lyricon. But that is probably not what you wanted me to talk about.
No, it's cool. Like these are things like I just have no idea about, and I'm sure a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah,
I didn't know that an EWI existed until I met you this
year. Yeah, it's super niche. It goes super deep. But yeah, I got into them because I saw one at a musical instrument store at Long McQuaid, actually, and I was like, that looks cool. And so I played it, and I wasn't super impressed. It was the EWI 5000. I wasn't super impressed with the way that it sounded, but I was like, I'm going to university next year. It'd be nice to have it as like an option if I want to practice, not in the practice rooms, because Humber back in the day, and probably still, does not have that many practice rooms. So I was preparing myself to be able to practice more while not having the access that maybe I needed. And that's how I got into it. But eventually I would hear recordings of people playing the instrument and it sounding amazing, and I was like, how can I make my instrument sound like that? And in order to like take it to the next level, I started to learn about stuff like MIDI and synthesizers, and that's it's been a long journey for me, but after 10 years of playing the instrument, I feel like I know everything that I need to know
Nice.
to make it happen in the way that I want it to.
So is it a MIDI controller, or can it make its own sound when it's not plugged into a computer?
That's a good question, and it varies depending on the instrument. The 5000, which is what I started with, it does both. It has built-in sounds, and it is also a MIDI controller. The built-in sounds are not great. It's most people's gripe with the 5000 is just that the sounds, they don't respond very well to breath control, which is kind of ironic given that that's what the instrument is all about. But as a MIDI controller, it works beautifully. So that's how I've been playing it for the past many years.
And what are the differences between like different types of EVs, and like do you use specific ones for like specific genres or to get certain sounds?
Yeah, there are a lot of differences between all the different models. So I'd say that the most commonly used ones for like the longest period of time, I guess, have been the EWI from Akai, the Aerophone from Roland, and the WX5 or WX7 or WX11, which are Yamaha instruments which aren't being made anymore. But the main differences come in the keys. On the EWIs, they are touch sensitive, but on the other instruments, they're like actual physical keys that move, like on a saxophone or a flute. And some people prefer that. I personally like the touch sensitive keys because there's no moving parts, so there's no like upper limit to how fast I can play. It's just how fast can I move my fingers, as opposed to how fast can I move these like levers, I guess. And the other difference is in the mouthpiece and like what kind of sensors are built in there. So the Aerophones and the Yamaha instruments, they have like a reed. It's not like a real reed, but it's another like little plastic lever that you can manipulate with your lip, and you can use that for pitch bend or other MIDI messages if you set it up. And the EWI kind of similarly has a bite sensor, but it's not a reed. It's just like a little pressure sensor that you bite on if you want to. So that's the main differences.
Do you blow air into, I guess, the sensor?
Yeah, there's a pressure sensor on the inside, and it senses changes in air pressure, and then it turns that into MIDI data and sends that off to be processed by whatever computer or synthesizer you're using it with. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, so the expressiveness of the instrument is it's really something. And if you get your instrument, your controller talking to the synthesizer, and you get that all compatible and hooked up and everything, then playing a synthesizer is really, really fun. Because I can use all of the expressive control that I've spent years honing as a saxophone player and as a flute player. So
yeah. And I guess you kind of already answered this, but when would you choose to maybe like use a MIDI keyboard versus the wind controller?
Right. Well, that's an interesting point. So the wind controller, like most wind instruments, it only plays one note at a time. So for that reason, it's better for melodies, lead lines, stuff like that. I kind of think of it as like, if my saxophone had like a more synthesizer-y tone, whereas with a keyboard, it's great because you can play multiple notes at once and experiment with harmony and stuff like that. But it is a little bit different trying to get the same expressive control. It's certainly possible, but it requires mod wheels and pitch bend wheels, and even like there are breath controllers for keyboard players that you can like hook up to your keyboard. And yeah, people have done really amazing things with that. I'm thinking specifically of artists like George Duke and Joe Zawinul, really great synthesizer players on the keyboard side that have honestly really inspired my synthesizer playing on the EWI. So yeah, it's cool stuff.
And I guess it's more natural when you're playing a synth or a controller that is like mimics the instrument that you play in real life acoustically.
Exactly. That's the other thing. Like, I'm not a very good keyboard player at all, so if I want to play a synthesizer, it makes more sense to use, a digital wind controller.
And do they all sort of resemble the saxophone, or are there some that resemble the flute?
They pretty much all resemble the saxophone. There are some that are more like a recorder. And there are some that have fingering systems that are kind of similar to the flute, but the flute actually presents an interesting challenge because instead of using your thumb to change registers like you would on a saxophone, you use air pressure on the flute to change registers, and that's very hard to code into a electronic wind instrument. So,
especially because it can vary by player, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Depending on how big your aperture is and where you aim it, there's so many variables.
Yeah, trying to code that sort of thing into an electronic wind instrument is tricky. So for that reason, they mostly resemble saxophones.
Maybe one day.
Yeah, maybe one day.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
So do you design all of your own, when you're working with the synthesizer, do you design all of your own sounds for whatever you're recording, and kind of what does that process look like?
Yeah, I do now. That's not always a skill that I had, but in recent years, it's something that I've been learning about and working on. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to experimenting with the synthesizer and finding out what each particular synthesizer is capable of and what sort of sounds it's really good at making. And the other thing is, of course, like, what does the music need? Like, does it need like a very aggressive sound, or does it need like something that's like a little bit more chill? Does it need something with like a lot of high frequency content, or like something with evenly spaced overtones over the harmonic series? That sort of thing.
Cool. And the last question I want to ask you in this, I guess, topic of iwis is, do you ever perform live using an iwi? And if so, how do you set up the tech so that you can do that?
Yeah, great question. Yes, I do. I have a bunch with Freak Motif, and back in the day, I played with a band called Slamborghini. We're actually getting back together.
These band names are awesome.
Yeah, I didn't come up with either of them, but they are great. And with both of those bands, what I used most frequently was my laptop, and that came with its own particular set of challenges. But typically, what I would do is I would run something like Mainstage or Ableton Live on the laptop, and I would host virtual synthesizers in there, and then I would just try and put it somewhere on the stage where it wouldn't get kicked or stepped on or knocked over, and that's what I did. And these days, I will continue to be using my laptop for, shows on larger stages. But if I'm playing in like a bar or something, or if I'm doing like a tour, then I think I'll use an iPad instead, or like some sort of standalone synthesizer. I have a Moog Mother 32 that might do the trick. So just something that's like a little bit less valuable, I guess. But also is designed for the purpose of being a synthesizer. Laptops are great. They do a lot of stuff. I've had them malfunction on stage before, which is never fun. So there's a lot to be said for using a tool that is actually designed for a specific purpose rather than like an all-purpose tool for music performance.
And so this would be like MIDI controller connects to the laptop, and then that would connect to some sort of speaker.
Yeah.
Right?
Sometimes I go out from the headphone jack, but usually I use an audio interface.
Nice. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And you have an EP coming out soon.
I do, yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure. It's called Gradualism. It's a 3-track EP, and it's a little on the short side for an EP, I guess, but each track has a music video that sort of expands on the let's see, I had a really nice line figured out for this. You can edit it in later, so I sound smart. But it expands on the narrative of each track. So yeah, 2 out of the 3 of the tracks are out right now, and I've got the third one coming out at the end of the month. And
Exciting.
the biggest thing about that EP was that every track sort of started with a randomly generated sequence of notes going through a randomly generated synthesizer patch. And basically that's what each track started with, and then it was up to me to sort of take that material and make it into something that sounds musical and makes sense. And that sort of process of writing music to me was super fun, and I think that it actually allowed myself to really be myself on that EP, because the randomly generated material was sort of like holding up a mirror to the truest parts of my musical self in a way that maybe I wouldn't be so like freely able to access if I was just trying to write music from scratch. So
that's really awesome. And what did you use to generate that material?
I used Max for Live. There's a really nice Max for Live device. I forget who developed it, but I found it on maxforlive.com, and it's called Device Randomizer L9. And basically you point it at any device in Ableton, so a synthesizer or like a plugin or anything, and you like hit randomize, and then every single parameter that can be randomized is randomized. So yeah, things get really chaotic, but using that method, I was able to discover some sounds that otherwise I never would have really thought to use or to create. So
cool.
Would recommend.
Yeah. And were there situations where you generated something and you just hated it and just like do it again?
Yeah, for sure. And there's also situations where I generated something and I I didn't like aspects of it, so I would change it a little bit or like put some EQ on there so that it would like fit in with the music. So I wasn't very strict about staying absolutely true to whatever was presented to me with this like randomly generated stuff, but it was really handy as a writing prompt to sort of inspire some different sounds and some different melodies and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I find like it's like that thing of looking at a blank canvas it's more overwhelming than looking at a canvas with like a little dot of color, Yeah. It's like just sort of taking that first step is often the hardest part.
Yeah, absolutely. And this helps a lot, I find. And it's nice because, because it's randomly generated, it doesn't belong to anybody else, so I can still kind of claim it as my own thing.
Yeah, I've heard of a lot of like songwriting prompts where you do randomly generated words.
Yeah.
And you have to include those words in the song.
Yeah, that's a cool way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Let's go through the tracks. I know the most recent one was EMC, but what was the name of the first one that you...
That was Livewire.
Livewire. And that was the video with the dancer, correct?
Yeah, Christine, yeah.
Nice. And so did you write all of the tracks and like make all the music on your own and then bring it to like people for the music video, or was there some collaboration musically?
Well, there, yes and no. The typical thing in jazz and stuff is you kind of like write chord symbols and then you just say, all right, here's kind of what I want you to play. Do whatever you want with this, and if you get the right musicians together, then it's going to sound incredible. So that's the approach that I took with Livewire. I took the randomly generated sounds and sequences, and then I thought, okay, what chords can I use to harmonize this material? And I figured that out. I made like a little demo track, and then I sent it off to my musicians, and they did a much better job than I ever could playing, keys and bass and drums and all that stuff. So that's how I did that. That's
cool. And I guess something that I'd love for you to go deeper into is, I guess, more of the logistics between, having an idea and bringing it to that finished product, just in media where it's like, yep, I wrote this, brought it to the studio, and then it was done. But it's like there's a lot more steps within that.
Yeah.
So even like with just like finding musicians, were there other places that you've made connections other than school, or how was that process for you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, when it comes to, finding musicians, I mean, I've been living in Toronto for coming on 10 years, 8 years, 9 years, long time. Anyway, yeah, and if you live in a city a really long time and you're playing shows, you're gonna meet a lot of people, and I think for me, finding people to play with isn't really the issue. The issue is typically, are they free?
Musicians are busy.
They are, but we're really spoiled over here in Toronto because there's so many incredible musicians doing all kinds of cool stuff. And that's true for every city, but I think Toronto, because it has all of the education and it has a big part of Canada's music industry. It's a good spot for that.
Yeah.
But I really feel what you're saying about like all the missing steps that you don't really get to hear about in in like media and podcasts and stuff, unless it's like Song Exploder or something like that. But there were a lot of intermediary steps in creating each of these tracks, and they were a challenge to create too. And one thing that I learned throughout this whole process is deadlines. Deadlines are really important. So for every project that I'm setting for myself going forward, I'm going to be sure to set deadlines for myself, or like sketch up like a week by week, or like a bi-weekly sort of like list of steps or list of goals. Like, I have to have the track planned out by this point, and like written by this point, and like recorded by this point, and mixed by this point, and mastered by this point, and then released by this point. And just kind of like working backwards from the release date that you want to have, I guess. There were definitely times where I had to say, like, I don't have much time to work on this, so this is what it's gonna be, and I just have to move on. And like, thank goodness for that, because otherwise, who knows if the project ever would have been made, And I'm really happy and proud of what came out. And honestly, if I had more time on it, I'm not sure that I could have even done a better job. So that's why I feel like deadlines are important. And they can be like a little bit flexible, but like I'm gonna try and keep myself on track that way in the future.
So especially with production, there's that tendency to, you could sit for hours just tweaking knobs, a millimeter to the left or right.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that was huge was all the feedback that I got. I showed the track to so many people, when it was like in the middle stages and in the end stages, and I got like all sorts of notes about like ways that I can improve the mix, or like even the arrangement. And I would always like do what I could to incorporate that feedback as much as possible without totally destroying the piece of music and destroying my like initial artistic vision. But yeah, that definitely helps. It's like you say, having people in the room who can like let you know, like encourage you, but also let you know that like, maybe you should think about, making this part a little bit quieter. Like that's super helpful.
Yeah, and do you find that when you're composing nowadays, it's more sort of, I guess, centered around production and music, or because I feel like in your tracks there's still that element of like jazz performance and playing live and improvisation, but then now it's sort of mixed in with the electronic sounds, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm always gonna be a performer and somebody, like, I'm always gonna have that background as a performer and a jazz musician and all that stuff, and that's always gonna be something that I love about music, that sort of like spontaneity and improvisation and like kind of like organic looseness that comes with it. But I also really love electronic music, and I really love music production. I just think it's so much fun, or at least it can be, like, most of the time. So yeah, mixing those two things is always going to be present in my music.
Awesome. And you also had a performance last week with Bagels, and
you were there.
Yeah, I was there, and my mind was blown.
Thanks for coming out.
It was so much fun.
Yeah, it was. That was our very first show. It was at the Cloak and Dagger. It was a challenge fitting 6 people onto that stage, but we made it work.
So Bagels is a band for listeners.
It is.
Which
yes.
We will link in the description.
Yeah.
So you can check them out. We'll link everything, all of your EP and all the socials.
Yeah, so Bagels was started by Yoon, who actually plays keys on my EP, and her friend David. And I forget when they started it, but they have some tracks out as a duo, and to play it live, they sort of got a bunch of other musicians involved, and including playing the original Bagels music. We're also playing some music by Mickey Lee Smith, who is doing vocals and violin, and some covers as well. And we'll keep developing the repertoire for that band and see what happens. But I'm really excited about it because I think, well, to me, the most exciting thing about that band is the skill set that everybody brings to the table. I think it's really exciting that everybody plays multiple instruments, and everybody except for me is pretty good at singing. And
I disagree, but go on.
Thank you. But yeah, it's that just makes it so that we can have like a really flexible and exciting like live show. Mm-hmm. So I'm really stoked to see how that turns out.
Yeah, and something that I really loved was how you had your own sound in the band, and you brought new life into like the covers and to Mickey's songs as well. I was listening back to the Spotify recordings, and it was just like, it was 2 completely different versions, but I loved both of them. Yeah.
That was cool because to adapt the music to playing with a live band and the people who were in the band, both the music from Bagels and Mickey's music had to change, like not a lot, but like substantially. And actually workshopping Mickey's tunes into the form that you heard the other night was one of the most fun parts of rehearsal, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you didn't rehearse for too long, which is like I would never have known because it was so polished.
Yeah. We I'm not sure how many rehearsals we did, maybe 3, maybe 4, but it kind of really just came together at the last minute. I think we were only going to have 3 rehearsals, but at the last one we were like, we should probably do another one, and I'm glad that we did.
And did you use, was it just like you use like lead sheets with the chord symbols? Is that how you, I guess, relayed the message of what the songs were and all of that is?
Yeah, what's really funny about that band is I think everybody had their own charts that they like made. I think a lot of people were going from memory too, especially Yoon and David on the Bagels tunes. Mm-hmm. But to convey that information to us, we got demo tracks, and we got charts. And then Mickey, being the very artistic person that she is, she made her own charts with lyrics and like, symbols and drawings and stuff. And so that's what we had for the Bagel stuff. And for Mickey's stuff, we just had lyrics, actually. Lyrics and some chord symbols. But yeah, that was the other fun thing is just kind of seeing different ways to communicate musical information to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really cool because, I don't know, sometimes it could be sort of daunting, for me anyways, where it's like, oh my gosh, I gotta make this lead sheet, but I worry that since I don't have as much experience doing that sort of thing, it's like, oh, will they judge me if it's not a specific format or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. In my experience, and it depends on the situation too, but lead sheets, it can be good, but they can also be too much information. For some of the covers, especially that we were doing, all I needed was the form. I just needed to know we're going to do an intro, we're going to do a verse, we're going to do a chorus, and then Mickey's going to take a solo, and, you know, just like sort of a, you know, like point by point, like basically list of what was going to happen. Way more useful to me than a lead sheet. And same with Mickey's music. Like, I don't need a lead sheet. All I need is lyrics, because it's, you know, she's an incredible songwriter, and the lyrics dictate the music.
Yeah.
And with the bagel stuff, you know, the chords are a little bit more complicated, so a lead sheet was good. It was nice to know like each individual chord and have that information at my disposal. So yeah, it really depends.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think we can move on to our last sort of big topic, which is your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Because you are a YouTuber.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm an aspiring YouTuber.
So what made you want to start a YouTube channel, first off?
Well, I think the biggest thing was that around 2019, I had the brilliant idea of attaching a Wii remote to my iWii so that I could incorporate motion controls into my iWii playing. So for a while with bands like Lamborghini and Freak Motif, I would play with both my iWii and a Wii remote, communicating with my laptop, talking to main stage so that I could use motion controls to to trigger effects and stuff, and basically just like, you know, make an already expressive instrument like even more expressive, and have even more sounds and tools at my disposal. And I got a lot of questions about that. You know, predictably, why is there a Wii remote strapped to your iWii? So the main purpose of the channel in the early days was just to answer that question. And the first series of videos that I did, you know, kind of amateurly, was just a series of videos about how I set up that communication between the Wii remote and my computer, both using MainStage as a platform and Ableton Live as a platform. And despite the, you know, lack of quality and polish in those videos, they were pretty well received in my like little niche wind controller community. And I discovered that I really like making videos, and so I just kind of kept doing it and kept trying to grow the channel. And I caught the attention of some other wind controller manufacturers and people who make synthesizers and software, and so they would send me their products to use on the channel, and that's been really nice. I think
That's awesome.
I think the biggest and most rewarding partnership has been with Recorder Instruments, which is a subsidiary of Proel SPA, which is an Italian company with a branch in the States. And anyway, they make this instrument called the Recorder, and there's a little dot after the first E. So I made a bunch of demo videos for them and some tutorials for them, and eventually they brought me to the NAMM show last year.
Wow.
That was really fun. I got to play their instrument at NAMM, and it was a great time.
So did they just initially just contact you out of the blue?
Yeah, they did. You know, they asked me if I'd be interested in making a video for their instrument, and I was like, yeah, and so I did. And they liked it, and the partnership just kind of grew from there.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been great because they have like a relatively small but very dedicated team behind that instrument, and they were very receptive to you know, some ideas that I had about like ways to, you know, change the firmware and like improve on the instrument. And they were just like really fun to talk to and work with, and I felt very respected, and it was just a great experience.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm you know, as someone who has like just over, you know, 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, and like, you know, I'm not even monetized yet. Just the fact that they just kind of looked at my channel and took a chance on me just really was nice.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I think 2000's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
it is,
nothing
you know,
to shake a stick at.
For sure. You know, I look at other YouTubers who have like, you know, numbers in like the, you know, the quintuple digits and in the millions. I'm like, yeah, 2,000 is not that much. But then I imagine like all those people in a room, and I'm like, yeah. 2,000 people couldn't fit in this room. That's for sure.
Sort of along that topic, do you ever feel pressure to like with like TikTok and Instagram stuff? Do you feel pressure to make more like short form content versus long form content, or are you sort of just going with what you personally want to make?
Yeah, I do feel that pressure to a certain extent, but for the most part, I haven't really caved to it for two reasons. One is that I don't know if the TikTok format really appeals to me. I think to be successful on that platform, you sort of have to, fit in with what's going on. And compared to Instagram and YouTube, I think that like Instagram and YouTube are a little bit more open-minded when it comes to like what sort of content does well there. So I'm kind of just, playing to my strengths, and I'm trying not to, bend to like the lowest common denominator internet viewership culture too much.
I constantly feel the pressure to make a TikTok account.
Yeah, I have one.
But,
there's content on there, but it's not doing great because I'm not doing the TikTok thing. It's literally just vertical versions of some of the stuff that I put on YouTube and
I do
Instagram
the same
stuff.
thing.
Yeah.
I feel like for me there's very much a difference between content and something that I make creatively. And if I make too much content, then I feel that I'm not being creative.
Yeah, and that's a really important distinction. There's nothing wrong with content, but I think we have to remind ourselves that we're trying to make art first and foremost.
Yeah, I don't have the charisma to be a TikToker, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know if I do either, and that's fine. Like, with anything, I'm sure if I were to like do it and really do it, then I would go somewhere with it the same way that I did with YouTube, but I don't really want to. Sounds exhausting. I'd rather...
like you need to dedicate so much time to it in order for it to actually be successful, where you'd get a lot of viewers.
For sure. Yeah. And I'm no like expert in content creation, but from what I've heard, like YouTube is not that it pays exceptionally well to begin with, but like that is the platform that tends to give the smaller creators the most money and like ad revenue and stuff.
Yeah. Do you have like a permanent sort of area that you film or a setup? Do you use lighting?
Yeah. I don't really have too many options. For the most part, I film in my like tiny bedroom. It's in an attic. It's very small. But if I have, some nice light coming in from the window, and then I have a big ring light on my opposite side, and then I have like a smaller ring light directly in front of me, then I find that looks pretty good on camera. And I I discovered early on that I can't put a camera on my desk because my desk is very wobbly because my floor is not even. Because again, old Toronto apartment stuff. So I actually have a mic stand. Yeah, I actually have a mic stand that kind of like goes over my desk, and I hang my phone off of that, and that is my camera. And recently my mom kindly sent me her old iPhone 8 when she upgraded to a new iPhone, and so now I have two cameras.
Nice.
Yeah.
You get those double perspectives.
Yeah. It's fun, and
it's helpful because you don't have to film twice.
Yeah, for sure. It's a little bit more in terms of like data management and everything, but it is worth it. And DaVinci Resolve has some really good auto synchronization using waveforms and stuff, so that's a really handy feature.
Yeah. And I guess to close off, I have two more questions. So the first question is, when you were sort of just like beginning your journey of pursuing music on a more serious level, what is a resource or a piece of advice that you wish you had been told at that time?
I mean, I think that my answer would be get into music production sooner. Even if it's not like super seriously, there's a lot that you can learn from writing music and recording music. So, and I will say that for me at least, recording music is the best way to write music. So I think that is the advice that I would give a younger version of myself, and it's the advice that I would give students who are like seriously interested in pursuing music as well.
Awesome. And is there any type of music that you can name that you're listening to right now that you would recommend that someone listen to?
Wow, that's that is a big question. Yeah.
Or like the first thing that comes to mind.
First thing that comes to mind. Definitely check out my brother's new album. It's called Hone, Hohn. It's a self-titled album. It's some really beautiful electronic music made from field recordings. That is what comes to mind first and foremost. Otherwise,
listen to EMC.
Yeah. Otherwise, listen to my music. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You're the very first interview ever.
Sweet.
So, yeah.
I'm honored.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Bedroom Studios podcast. Don't forget to add this podcast to your playlists and like and follow us on social media at Bedroom Studios Podcast. I will also be linking Stef's social media in the description. You should definitely check out his YouTube channel and his EP. And also make sure to follow our playlists of guest music recommendations, as well as music our guests have created. Both will be linked in the description.